to our first ever, I think, Hamlet History Night. We're so glad that we're all here. I'm Edie Sarnoff, and I'd like to introduce our speakers, Ann Bifford, Sandy Kine, and all of you who would like to make comments about where you live and the history that you know. Ann, you want to get started?
Yeah, do you want me to go first? Yeah, I'm not from around here, as they say. I came in 1972. They let me go to Gettysburg College, and I graduated even. But so I'm doing Beechersville, or I call it Beecherstown, because people from anywhere understand B-E-E-C-H-E-R is Beechers, but really it was Beecher. And I first heard about it, well, I don't know if you can see the picture. This is the Boyer House along the creek, but it was known as the Thomas House, I believe. But anyway, no, I shouldn't tell you this part of my story. But I had a boyfriend who lived there after college, and no girls allowed, he said. But, you know, like the boys club, no girls allowed. But I saw that there was this farmhouse up on the hill, and I would dream of living in that farmhouse up on the hill, and also Boyer property, and that I would bake biscuits and bring them to him at this house. Well, it turned out that I got to live in that house right before they renovated it, and it fell down and went boom. The house on Blue Ribbon Road. But anyway, at the time, a friend of mine said, you know that place down there, he's pointing to Beecherstown. He said, that used to be a big industrial area. And I said, oh yeah? Can't tell today. But that's when I first heard about it, probably in the early or late 1970s. But anyway, the reason I learned a lot about Beecherstown, or Beechersville, is because I bought the old Miller house on Beecherstown Road, where the bridge is. And I wanted to know how old my house was and about my house. And you can't study that house with running into David Beecher, because he was he was quite busy. So anyway, but I want to start even before Beecherstown was established. There was Colonel Hamilton, who lived from 1721 to 1772. He was one of the Scotch-Irish that came over, you know, the 170 families that came over and settled in what now is Adams County. He was the first sheriff of the newly formed York County, served 2 terms. There's quite a story about that. I won't go into it, but they did have an election, and I don't think he was elected, but somehow he got to be the sheriff anyway. It's quite a story. He was a hero in the French and Indian War, and when he had his place surveyed and warranted and surveyed to patent it, the surveyor said that it was along the Conewago where the mill is, on Ziegler Mill. He said, well, this place was settled earlier, supposedly 1739, and it had slight improvements, but the area along the Conewago was abandoned during the Indian War troubles. And then later on, people started coming back to that area. But anyway, he was a hero of the French and Indian War. And I've read that York County allowed him to choose a tract of land, and he chose a tract that stretched from future Beechersville to basically Mummasburg, and a lot of it along the Conewago Creek. And he named it Hamilton Delight. I want to say, I know Sandy's going to be using this book. This is kind of the Bible in these parts, I think. So a lot of my information I got from this. I got from a talk that, I don't know if any of you knew her. Her name was Mrs. Alice Raffensperger. And she gave a talk in 1950 to the Historical Society. And then there's an 1880 article in a local newspaper that gave a lot of information. It was called the Old Shippensburg Road, and told about the history previous to, before 1880. So, and then I went to Historical Society. I used those as a bouncing off place, and then I would go to the Historical Society, the courthouse, all that. But anyway, this is a quote from John's Pursuit. So I couldn't get the whole thing on the slide, but Hans Hamilton died in 1772. He was only 51 years old. He gave many of his prized possessions to his children, and I listed their names: Thomas, Edward, Harriet, Sarah, Mary, Hans Garvin, George, John Williams, and James. And as an example, he bequeathed to son Hans a sum of 5 pounds, a silver handled sword, which you can kind of see an example of it in the corner there, brass mounted pistols, and his silver medal. Oddly, his son did not receive as much money as the other heirs. I'm not sure why. But the main thing for us, talking about Beechersville, he directed his brother and executor, John Hamilton, to sell all his lands and real estate within 2 years, if possible, the proceeds to be distributed among his children, his heirs. So Jacob Gilbert, got his years there, 1756 to 1831. In 1788, Jacob Gilbert warranted part of Hamilton's tract, Hamilton's tract, 151 acres. He was one of 7 German families that immigrated to the area from Northampton County. In 1798, Jacob was taxed for 1 mill, and it said it was there as early as 1772. There was a card fulling mill in operation. Sometimes I see the date. Sometimes I see 1772. Sometimes I see an indication of 1792. But if it was 1772, the mill would have been there when Hans Hamilton was still alive. So David Beecher, 1793 to 1880, founded Beechersville in 1825. He was the son-in-law of Jacob Gilbert, and he married Jacob's daughter Anna Mary, about 1814. And here, I went online, and here's a picture, I hope you can see it, of David Beecher and Anna Mary. I think she went by Mary most of the time, Gilbert Beecher. And I assume those were taken later in life, right? But he had 25. But he had a nice, dark hair, didn't he? Let's see, I don't know, did they color their hair back then? Anyway, yeah, they lived a long time. So here we are again, this is the Boyer property now, the Francis Thomas house. This picture, the Adams County Historical Society has a file on Arendtsville, and there's a section of Beecherstown in that. I think that's where I got this picture. It's blown up, you can't see it so well, can you? But David Beecher built a tannery at this house in 1825, the same year he founded Beecherstown. And if you know, do you know where that is? On Beecherstown Road. It's sort of across from the Beecherstown houses, but the field on the Arendtsville side is where the tannery, I understand, was. It would be in the forefront, the lower, the mid, what would you call that, right-hand side of the house. According to this Mrs. Alice Raffensperger, who gave that 1950s talk to the Historical Society, this tannery enjoyed a good trade for a number of years, and the old settlers remember long lines of hides which were hung up to dry. And it was abandoned in 1881. So I don't know if you can tell, these are ads from the paper, newspaper articles. And so he founded Beechersville in 1825. And from 1826 to 1828, there were advertisements for the Caughnawaga Woolen Factory. And some of these yeah, because I guess the one I wrote out on the right-hand side has a different date than the one on the left-hand side, I believe. But, so it's telling what they do. They card, spin, weave, and dress cloth. And what I found interesting was, for the convenience of those at a distance, wool for carding and cloth for fulling will be received at the following places. And I don't know if any of these are familiar to you. Thomas McKnight's store in Franklin Township, John Gilbert's Tavern in Manalapan, Mr. Wert's Tavern on the road from Hunterstown. We lost a little bit of this. Hunterstown to Chambersburg. So Hunterstown to Chambersburg, I guess that would be Goldenville Road, somewhere on the Goldenville Road, Hunterstown to Chambersburg. John Grass's Tavern in Hunterstown, John Beecher's in Strabane, and William E. Camp's store and Bernhard Gilbert's Tavern, that says in Gettysburg. So from 1831 to 32, Jacob Gilbert died in 1831. David Beecher purchased the property from Jacob's widow and heirs for a little over $5,000. They weren't sure how to divide up the land, and he offered to purchase it. In 31, David Beecher was taxed for a fulling mill, a carding mill, a tannery, and a store. And I didn't know if they'd be here today, but the store was, anybody know Michelle Wald? Is that how you say her name, Michelle Wald? Anyway, it's the front of the house still, you can kind of tell it was a store. The store was, one of the houses there. I think, I was gonna put vocabulary.
Do we know what a fulling mill is?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, carding
would have
is you
been
card
wool,
it.
carding the
I think
wool.
it's all, well, it has,
Besides all do with
it
wool.
might be like to make it into felt. I could look it up, I forget. Does anybody know what a fulling is? I think it like makes it a felt. Would you do that over here?
It fully roughens up the surface of wool to make it repel water better.
Oh, is that before you make it into a cloth, or would you do
No, it's
that?
after.
So,
You would take a cloth and then you full the cloth. Like the wool and broadcloth, it's got that soft hand to it. That's, it's because it's full. It's got that, almost, it looks like a felted surface.
Okay.
The felt is actually just a bunch of fibers mushed together with an eye. This would be for a woven fiber, like worsted wool, but then they full the surface.
oh, okay, thank
Looks
you.
kind of felt,
He was taxed for those things, and the next year he erected a woolen factory on the site of the old carding fulling mill. I'm realizing anything I'm lost things that I squeezed over to the side, so. But this is another ad. The Adams Sentinel and General Advertiser from 38, woolen factory for rent. 150 acres of land on which there are 4 dwelling houses. And I wrote that this is of particular interest to me because I'm assuming that's not Beechersville proper, but property that David Beecher was acquiring. He was buying all kinds of property, and he had big plans. And part of the property is where my house is today, and then part of the property is like the Warner Farm, you know where that is, which was the Steinauer place. But anyway, in 1825, the same year that he founded Beechersville, he bought 63 acres and a premises, a house, from Christian Grove, who got it from Saltzgiver, who got it from Elizabeth McCleary, who was the heir of James McCleary, who was the original patentee of the property. And then in 37, he got it almost 100 acres from the Steinauers. And that land came from John Hamilton. They had original, I shouldn't talk about what I don't know, but in the late 1700s, they got it from John Hamilton, the Steinauers, and he was the executor of Hance, as we remember, Colonel Hamilton's will. But anyway, I love it because it says 4 dwelling houses. So I'm counting my house and Dan's house, you know, trying to figure out how many houses there were. Some of them could have been houses in Beecherstown, I'm not sure. So here's the bridge. I got that from our Bible. It was white. People think of it as being red. It was white. Oh, here. I'm losing some of this. The bridge abutments are still there. Does anybody know the story of what happened to that bridge? You know where it was? It's Beecherstown Road. If you know where my house is, on the corner of Punch and Beecherstown Road, I'm like surrounded by road, and the old road goes to the one side of my house, and the new road cuts through the property and goes over the new bridge. Well, there used to be a covered bridge. I'm just told that somebody with big farm equipment tried to go through it and wrecked it. But, so anyway, they had to tear it down, and the abutments still stand today. You can't see it this time of year so well because they're overgrown. The lady that lives there doesn't take care of it that well. And the ground there. And one side is falling down a little bit due to the flooding over the years and stuff like that. But the abutments are still there. But it doesn't look like this because if you see, this is Punch Road here. Punch Road, and this went across, over to Beecherstown on the other side. But now Punch Road comes in here, like that, and my driveway was here. My driveway was the old road, but when they put in the new bridge, things got changed around. So today Punch Road actually speaks in here. I am told by the family, the Miller family, that owned the house for 50 years before I did, that they salvaged part of the part of the bridge, and used it to side the outside wall of the bathroom in my house, which was put in 1961, because the state came, they were gonna come right through my house. And Mrs. Miller said, "Oh no, this is my family home. You can't go through my house." They said, "Well, then we're going to tear up your property." "Oh, that's okay. You're not tearing down my house," said Susan Miller. So they did. They came and they separated the barn where the outhouse was from the house. And now she couldn't get to the outhouse. So they had to put in a bathroom. And so that was the first bathroom at my house in 1961.
It's pretty good that a 4'2" lady could keep her house.
Yeah, she was short, yeah. 4'2",
I
was she
just
that?
exaggerate.
She
wasn't
wasn't
5 feet.
No,
She
and
wasn't 5 feet.
I keep thinking I need to elevate the kitchen sink because I wash dishes.
Kind
Yeah, that's what I hear. But everybody loved her. She made cookies. So anyway, yeah. Just a few tidbits. I'm kind of going chronologically here. When I was Googling, I used to be able to Google better than I can today. I don't know. But the Marion Rangers, it was a little ad in the newspaper. "You will meet for a parade at the store of David Beechersville on Saturday, 24 November instant, 10 o'clock a.m., precisely at which time there will also be a court of appeal held by order of Arendtsville, 1849. So I guess they were a militia group that would meet and parade, do their exercises and stuff, drills and things. And that was not the only group that met in front of David Beecher's, but when I put this together, I couldn't find the other ones I found over the years, but I remember finding other ones up through the early 1850s. So I'm sure you can't read that. I'm so sorry. Or maybe you can see some names. I was hoping maybe you might know some of these names. The merchant, it says at the top, was David Beecher. He was 56 in 1850. And they talk about the tanners, the manufacturers, David Geyer, a weaver, William Miller, blacksmith, John Minter, papermaker, John Orner. You have the laborers and farmers. Now, this would have been for Butler, because Butler Township was established in 1850, so some of these people might not have just been in the Beecherstown area. But as I write, David Beecher bought and sold a lot of land. Total acreage he owned changed from year to year. In 1856, he was taxed in Butler Township for 34 acres of land, 3 houses, 40 acres of land, a paper mill, I guess it's a woolen mill, and a tanyard. Anybody live near a creek? I know you
Yes,
do
we
in
do.
the back. Yeah. So it floods, right? And in this 1880s article, it talked about the first 3, I guess it was a big flood in 1851. There was the August 1854 flood. The water rose 3 feet on the first floor of the Arendtsville mill. I guess that was in Arendtsville. Do you know the Arendtsville? And then undated, you think that's what it is? Oh, okay. Undated coal flood. It was named for the rising waters that lifted a coal pit, which was ready to be drawn and carried its contents away. The waters, for a short time, presented the appearance of a stream of ink. And then the high water mark. Oh, I don't know if I can read this. This is later, 78. Oh, I don't know how to make it smaller. Oh, wait, I might have to get your husband back. Escape. Oh, sorry, but I'm gonna go back where it was. About 9 o'clock on Saturday night, as Mr. John Miller of Beechersville was crossing the Conewago at the paper mill fording, a short distance below his residence, with a load of wool gathered during the day, in the strong current and darkness, the wagon struck the icebreaker of the footbridge. He jumped out, but was carried down some distance before making the shore and securing help. The horse and wagon were found to have drifted several hundred yards. The former was rescued, the horse, and on Sunday, the wagon was also gotten out of the stream. Only a few of the bundles of wool missing. So I bought my place right before a flood in 1996. I think it was from Hurricane Fran. It gets really high down there. Does it flood at your part of Conewago?
We sit up, and so, Biglerville will flood before my house.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just because of the elevation, but, oh yeah, it's very dramatic. I mean, you've seen some of the pictures I
Yeah,
posted.
I know, yeah.
I don't want to put a bottle in and send it your way. But, yeah.
Might go right by.
It might.
Yeah, when I bought the property, the Millers sold the farm and a development company bought it. And, because I couldn't afford $140,000. That sounds so low now, doesn't it? It was like 45 acres for $140,000. Well, that was way over my price range. But anyway, so I bought the farmhouse and the land they couldn't develop from the developers. And so the land they couldn't develop was undevelopable because it was wetlands. And oh my goodness, it is wetlands when it floods. It's a raging river. The whole thing. Anyway, so
Is
You
your,
live-
and is your house ever in danger of flooding?
It's, no, and I had to prove it to the flood insurance.
Sure.
people.
I'm sure you did.
Because if you ever do
Is that
GPS to
right?
my house, it puts you right in the middle of the wetlands,
Yeah.
it's not where I live, but you know, I'm above the 100-year flood
Good.
line.
Good.
You know how things are going these days, so let's hope I stay there. I'm sorry, so now I don't know how to full screen it. Are you okay if I just keep, yeah, is it okay? I'm gonna leave it like this, is that okay, everybody? I hope you can see it. So, maybe you've seen the 1858 map of Adams County. Beechersville is on it, but it's very hard to read. I have a color copy and I have a black and white copy that was made, but, names on the map in the village of Beecherstown, or Beechersville, I think it's William Miller, I believe it's John Hoover, and aren't the Kennys Hoover people?
One of them, yes.
So I wonder if it's related here, because he became a store owner, so, anyway. David Beecher, Samuel Lauer, or Lower, or it's spelled different every time, usually with the L-A-U-D-E-R. And, I'm not sure what the J stands for, Myers. Also Jeremiah Funt, I think it is, Daniel DeGitt, he owned my house at one time, Samuel Beecher, and Mrs. E. Camp. On the map is a woolen factory, the tannery, paper mill, and the schoolhouse. I don't know if you can see it, but I find it interesting. Well, we'll see it better on another map. But here are the houses of the village of Beechersville. This is the covered bridge part here, and it comes around. But there is a road, here's Punch. And here's a road that connected the little village to Punch. Down the road. There's another map that shows it better. It's no longer there. It's where the Johnsons on Punch, they park their cars and buses when they go west. She parked the bus there. This is the 1860 census. Again, it tells you what people did. So I love this ad for the Beechersville store. If you want cheap and good goods, the store at Beechersville is the place to call at. Millers and Son had the store then, 61. Okay, so here's this is a later map. It's a military map, 1930s military map, but it's probably based on an earlier map. It does show Pine Grove School. And on June 8th, 1863, so right before the Battle of Gettysburg, Miss Eliza married named Camp, her maiden name was Kent, transferred 4 purchases of land to the school directors for $1 per schoolhouse. They paid $1 for the schoolhouse. And you can see on the map, here's the houses in Beechersville, but you can see the road that went across from Beechersville, where I live right there.
Is that school building still there?
Yeah, they turned it into a house,
Okay.
and somebody's living there. I've never been inside it, but yeah, it's a house. The Conewago factory, J.W. Peoples leased it from David Beecher. This is from the Star and Sentinel. In 68, Beecher transferred the woolen mill, factory, and tannery to Jeremiah Deal. The 1870s census, the jobs that people had. So here's the map that most people are familiar with, and it's from 1872. So here was the woolen factory. I understand the building's still there. The race, you know, to have a mill, you need a race. That's where the water comes from, you know, to turn the wheels. The tannery is here. This is what we call the Thomas House. J.W. Beale had it there. But where it says Samuel Beecher, that was the store. I understand that was David Beecher's house. There was Stauffer, Myers, and William Coe all lived there in 1872. And then another advertisement in 72, it was leased by, the factory was leased by John Hammer. This was the first time I saw the name Beecherstown used. It was always Beechersville. Wool with orders could be left at Rebert and Bushman's store in Gettysburg, Monostock, it's a familiar one, and Emmett's store in New Oxford. So the paper mill. I just noted at the top, in 1850, John Warner was the paper maker. In 1860, Samuel Beecher, the son of David, was the paper maker. And then by 1870, it was Peter Binks. He was a paper manufacturer. I think they meant manufacturer, but that's how they spelled it. So David Beecher first built the mill, paper mill, in 1837 for the manufacture of wrapping paper and bonnet boards. So I get, you know, the hats ladies wore, they must have been really popular, and they didn't have, I guess, bags. You know, you always think that people took their baskets to the market, but, you know, wrapping paper, things could be wrapped in paper. He built it right next to the covered bridge. In 57, he transferred the mill and house where I lived to his son Samuel, and Samuel ran it for a good while, but in 69 he ran into some money problems, and he had debts he couldn't pay, and the house and mill were seized and offered at sheriff's sale. Interesting to note, he had been taxed for a new barn in 1860, and in the year that he ran out of money, 69, he had put the new front of my house, a two-story, two-room, two-story front of my house on. So I think he couldn't pay that bill. I'm not sure what bill he couldn't pay. So there was a sheriff's sale. It adjoined the lands of Widow Camp, George Blubaugh, Samuel Lauer, and J.W. Beale. Had, at the time, 57 acres, a dwelling house, and a three-story building, part stone, part frame, with two one-story frame buildings attached, formerly used as a paper mill. Also, the machinery in the buildings. A valuable property being on Conewago Creek with the water power sufficient for almost any kind of manufacturing business. So this was in 69. So R.G. McCreary, Robert McCreary, a Gettysburg attorney, purchased the property for $3,850 and converted it into a boxboard factory. I'm not really sure when Ingram and Cook took over, but according to my sources, they formed a company and leased the mills, and they started manufacturing newspaper quite successfully. I don't know if that's related to or different than the Conewago Paper Company, which was a big deal. It was organized in May of 1873 with E.W. Staley. He had owned one of the Gettysburg newspapers and then gave it to his son, Henry Staley. He was the president. R.G. was the secretary. W.A. Duncan, another attorney and lawyer in Gettysburg, was the treasurer. And O.F. Ingram was the superintendent, and Colonel Cook the machinist. They greatly enlarged the mill, furnishing it with first-class machinery for the manufacture of straw printing paper, filling orders from New York, Baltimore, New England, and San Francisco. So here's some newspaper articles. The compiler said that the Conewago Paper Company was organized, and it tells all the officers and the others that are involved with that. is about to go into operation. 7 miles from Gettysburg, it's about to go into operation. The large rotary boiler, needed for boiling the straw, manufactured in Wilmington, Delaware, arrived here last week and was at once taken to the mill. Mr. John Fromeyer hauled it with a 6-horse team. The boiler, the wagon weighs almost 17,000 pounds. This is an article that says it's probably now running. And then the second article on the page, 1874, our issue today is printed on paper manufactured at the Conewago Mill. Yay. Things are looking up for the company. They ordered a new boiler weighing 14,000 pounds. The company expected to turn out 4,000 pounds of paper every 24 hours. Orders included a contract to send 10 tons of straw newspaper every month to San Francisco.
Oh dear.
Yes. What could go wrong? A fire! So you know, there was a fire in Gettysburg that we, if you're a tour guide, if some of us know about. Well, we call it the Passmore House, but this reminds me of it. There was a fire. Paper mill destroyed by fire on Saturday night, October 23rd, 1875. $35,000 loss. I'm going to read this. The Conewago Paper Mill in Butler Township, this county, 1 mile from Arendtsville, was destroyed by fire about 11 o'clock Saturday night. The mill, a large structure, was full of expensive machinery, and the losses in the neighborhood of $35,000. About $3,000 worth of stock and $1,000 of paper were also consumed. How the fire originated is a mystery, but is generally attributed to spontaneous combustion. Probably a match in a bundle of rags. Or I don't even think you need the match, do you?
It's spontaneous.
No, as matches are frequently found by the rag something. The superintendent, Mr. McDonald, was at Gettysburg at the time, having come in with his family to spend Sunday with some friends. When he left Saturday afternoon, the mill, not running for several days, looked clean and right in every respect. And the last of the hands leaving locked all the doors. An incendiary, or above, or whatever that would be, somebody coming through, to have gotten where the fire was seen or an arsonist, I guess that would be, to have gotten where the fire was first seen must have forced several doors. The idea that a tramp trolling through the neighborhood may have set the mill on fire is hardly plausible. The insurances on the mill and machinery amount to, well, there it listed, I don't know if you can read it, $16,500 in the following companies, like Homey, North Schuylkill, and it lists all the insurance companies. The loss of the mill may prove a severe one to the neighborhood, as quite a number of families depended on it for employment. The house and barn were saved with great difficulty, and I'm thankful for that. Yeah, there were a lot of rumors and much gossip, but they think, what did they call that, combustible, spontaneous combustion. So in February of the following year, the Conewago Paper Company went bankrupt. They filed for bankruptcy. And there was a trustee sale where they sold the machinery. George Trossel and his wife Alice purchased the tract of land and dwelling, and the machinery was sold in lots. This is from this paper by Mrs. Raffensperger. I just kind of love this as a way to tie this up. A number of persons from the vicinity worked in the mills, both men and women, and persons moved to Beecherstown from far places and made their homes there. A peculiar thing is that quite a few came here from York County. Such names as Beecher, Beeler, Lauer, Bankert, Deal, and Binks are remembered as being connected with Beecherstown history. In addition to the mills, one man wove carpets in his house. Another man named Lauer made shoes for the neighborhood. And so it goes. Sometimes one business is absorbed by another, or again it is moved to even larger, better quarters. But here, the whole thing has gone entirely. The houses still stand, but not a wheel turns, all gone and forgotten. Beecherstown, the little town with a past history. And then this is a picture I took a couple August ago, 2018. And you can kind of see the fading village of Beecherstown in the distance. But, yeah, in the distance. Yeah, no, but they, in the advertisements, they say church nearby, but Arendtsville is just right there. Yeah, but isn't it interesting that Arendtsville is so close, and they built another community right next to it? But anyway.
Are you taking questions?
Oh, yes, questions. I hope I didn't bore you. Yes.
With all the mention of wool and tannery, there had to be sources of some animals of the lot coming. Were they locally sourced?
Well, like according to, I'm sure, and in fact, somebody even had those original land patents, those ones they got from the pens, and one of them was like sheep haven, something like that. So I think, that was a big thing, the farmers had sheep. But in a couple of the ads, they said if you have wool for processing, drop it off. So I guess people from all over the county had their wool carded and processed and, worked on it, yeah.
And then the paper making was from straw, not from trees and pulp, but from straw.
When they made the paper, yeah, when they went newspaper print. Straw. So I'm thinking maybe they found that, and maybe hemp, who knows? How hemp used to be a big product. But, the farms, maybe they realized that the farms were better for growing straw, or it was an easy crop to grow, to make paper. Yeah, the straw paper. Yes.
Where do you think the name came from? Do you think he was a beekeeper, raised bees?
Well, his name was Beaker. His name was Beaker, and I'd have to look up, I did look it up. Might have something to do with the hill. If you could Google it, where, the name Beaker comes from, but, that was his name.
I always think that.
I don't think it was a beekeeper. It sounds like beekeeper, doesn't it? Yeah, Beaker. Well, if you're a manufacturer, instead of manufacturer, yeah, I can see, it was an abbreviation.
Well, thank you so much, and that's great, and we can keep talking about that because it's so close to Arendtsville. But we could take a stretch, and I'll turn on the lights, and then Sandy, if you can regale us.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I thought there were gonna be people here from Beecherstown, and they were gonna. Okay.
Mr. Funt, was that funds
Oh,
from your
here's
family?
Arendtsville.
This the one,
I was just wondering how many people in the room are related to any of the names that were read?
Yeah, that's what. So you're one?
So Arendtsville.
Well, I do not have a PowerPoint like Ann does, because anytime I want to know about Arendtsville, I just go get my mom's book.
She's from around here.
And I use my book. But I told them when they asked me to do this, I was like, I do not know all things Arendtsville. I know some family history and stuff, but not So I'm just gonna kind of go through the book. We do have 2 extra ones here because, I mean, if I go like this, it's kind of hard for you to see a picture. I don't know how we want to handle that, but.
And I have my copy.
Yeah, whatever, but, I'm just gonna start on like page 6, but very at the very beginning. So Arendtsville was pretty much settled by Christian families that, what is now Manalapan Township. It says, Arendtsville and what is now Manalapan Township, and 72 acres and 118 perches in Franklin Township, just east of the present Arendtsville Square. There's a picture on there of how the town was originally laid out. Can you see on there?
What page is that?
6, page. The very beginning. I'm just gonna start like with, the Jacob Arndt part. But it says that, the devout Christian families were scarcely settled in the area before they established religious and educational institutions. Quoting directly from a deed dated 1781, know all men by these present that Stoffel St. Meyer and Jacob Arndt of Cumberland Township, County of York, and State of Pennsylvania, set over and confirmed unto Frederick Steinauer and Philip Hartzell. There's a Philip Hartzell in Arendtsville, the name of that in Arendtsville. Trustees for the United Congregations of Lutheran and Presbyterian, the Reformed Church. The above description piece of land situated in the township aforesaid on the waters of the great, and this says Canawago, Conawago, but it's spelled a little different than we spell it, containing 2 acres and 78 perches to them and their successors, to be kept for the use of the congregations aforesaid for a church, burying ground, and schoolhouse. Along with this deed, Jacob Arndt granted the free use of his spring at all times to the congregations and the schools. This lot is the present site of the Arendtsville Bank, that they were talking about. Adjoined what later became known as John's Pursuit, a 2-story log and weatherboard house of worship, and erected on this site in 1787. The first to be baptized from this congregation were John, Jacob, and Anna Catherine Schneider on March 26, 1786. For many years, this church was referred to as Arndt's Church. The schoolhouse and sexton house form one building made of logs and weatherboard, and it stood where Zion United Church of Christ now stands. Okay. Some of the early records of the congregation were Arndt, Barball, Bear, Bartles, Beesecker, Durham, Floor, Bunt, Glass, Gross, Hartman, Naus, Kraft, Kummel, Rau, Roth, Reinhardt, Schneider, Steinhauer, Young. Jacob Arndt, one of the founders of both the church and the school, and his wife Catherine had 7 children, 2 boys and 5 girls. The girls married farmers from the nearby areas. And it says about who they married, doesn't matter. About 1790, Jacob retired from farming and built a log house next to the log school along the Shippensburg Road and went into the tavern business. This tavern, built on a steep hill, had a walk-in basement constructed over a spring. The house, now owned by Miss Gretna Black, is encased in brick, and the spring is capped. Peter took over 140 acres of his father's land. John took over 40 acres bordering the Pearl Land. And in 1790 to 1796, Jacob was licensed to operate a tavern. In 1802, Jacob died at the age of 72, and in his will he made provisions that his wife should have the privilege of living in the spring house where we now dwell on the land herein after devised to my son Peter. Also 2 cows, 2 sheep, 2 beds and bedding, 1 stove, 1 chest, and such of the kitchen and cupboard furniture as she may think necessary for herself. Also my large Bible and prayer book and one other large book. The will also stipulated that my two sons Peter and John shall open and keep a lane of 8 feet wide between the stakes along the line between them at their mutual expense and between their houses to the big field on John's part of the land next to Martin Minter. These directions helped establish that John lived in the log house on Chambersburg Street where Claire and Ruth Arendtsville now live. These people don't live there anymore, but at the time of the book writing they did. Peter Arndt's house could have been the log house now encased by brick, or this is Mary Boyer and the line of Boyer Road. So then in 1797, John took over his father's tavern. He was elected as the first Adams County coroner. He married Barbara Naus, K-N-A-U-S-S, who built the first grist mill on the site of the former Arendtsville roller mill. He was an Adams County commissioner. He was on the committee for the Federal Constitutional Republicans. He built an imposing 2-story brick house and tavern, and he, or as he called it when applying for the tavern license, a house of public entertainment across from his father's tavern. He, 2 days after John was sworn in as sheriff by Judge Hamilton in 1818, fell to Sheriff Arndt to carry out Adams County's first legal hanging. James Hunter from Mount Pleasant shot Henry Hagee over a boundary dispute. James Hunter was found guilty as charged and was hanged on January 3rd, 1818. When John Arndt nodded his head to William Snyder, who pulled the bar which let the trap door open and dropped James Hunter into eternity. For almost 20 years, John Arndt held important county offices. And then when his wife, he died in 1826 at the age of 57. And when his wife died, he died, in 1826. When his wife died in 1854, so she lived quite a while after him, his estate was settled and Jacob F. Lauer bought much of the property. Jacob F. Lauer is my great-great-great-grandfather. And he bought the property, divided it into lots, planned the town, and petitioned to Harrisburg to call it Lauersville. Now, my brother and I were laughing the other night because through family history, we were always told that both families went to Harrisburg on the same day to petition to have, the one wanted it named Arendtsville because it hadn't technically been done, I guess. And then the Lauers wanted it called Lauerville. And supposedly, because they were both there at the same time on the same day, they put both names into a hat, and whatever name they pulled out, that's what it was named. And it was named Arendtsville because they pulled that out. Although with reading this, I'm not real sure the dates and things jive that could have happened, but that's just a story that my brother and I have always heard. Like your claim to fame, well, it should have been named Lauer. So that's but it does say here, he petitioned to have it called Lauersville. However, by this time, the Arndt name was too well established and it was never referred to as Lauersville. But as late as 1875, deeds for the property Jacob Lauer sold and gave, he had on it the location of the town as Lauersville. So he didn't give up the fight. He just keep it that way. Jacob Lauer actually laid out the town, laid out the shape of the town, laid out the streets, and he and his son Dorsey, who was my great-great-grandmother, built a lot of the houses in Arendtsville. They were very well-known builders. One thing that was fun was that the Swisher House, where the Culps live now, on the corner of Grandpa's Court. Yeah, Grandpa's Court. Main Street and going to Chambersburg, they were redoing the upstairs, and they had took plaster off the wall, and here on one of the boards was Dorsey Lauer's name drawn onto the wood on the board, because he would always sign his name. And he was well known for a double front door. So when we were kids, they would drive us around, and then, if there was like a house that had a double front door on it, we'd be like, there's a house Dorsey built, there's a double front door on it. And when Ann said about the house in Gettysburg that burned back in June, the house on Carlisle Street that burned, my great-great-grandfather built that house. He built it, and what was funny was, his name was John Clayton Dorsey Lauer. The man he built the house for's name was John Lauer. And they very often got their mail and things mixed up because of the two names. So, and because of that, and my great-grandfather was in the Civil War, and when he joined the Civil War, apparently there was also a John Clayton Lauer. So he took on the name Dorsey to try to keep the thing straight. But that house in Gettysburg burned because they were redoing the house, and they threw rags into the corner of the house, and they combusted and burned the house.
Why I said it was related in some way,
Yeah.
I think the
Yeah.
paper mill probably was saying that.
And we were hoping that they might be able to save it and rebuild it, because it had beautiful woodworking inside of it, but it's too far along. So my brother contacted the people who are tearing it down and said, you see anything in there that has a signature on it? Or grab us a piece of it or something. But yeah, and Dorsey is also the one that he put the first water line in Arendtsville in 1850s. So it ran from like Yellow Hill, let's see if I get this right, Steve told me, but I'm not sure I wrote it down. From Yellow Hill, it was like a concrete dam, to Heckenlober Road area, down to Mill Road, came out at the roller mill, then back up through Arendtsville, and back up to Yellow Hill. Part of that is up in Arendtsville at the ABS building, the Borough building. Part of the original piece of pipe is up, or at least was up there in the case that you can see it. So yeah, the both of them were pretty much established in Arendtsville at the time, and should be Lauerville.
Well, I think we'll start calling that. Nobody will know what we're talking about.
And one other thing with Dorsey, he and his brother Henry were both in the Civil War, and they're both buried up in Greenmont Cemetery. And they purchased 20 burial plots, so that if there's any veteran that doesn't have the money to be buried, they can be buried there for free. And there's only one other veteran buried there yet so far. And we're talking from the late 1800s, 1920 something. So I don't know if that's real well known or not.
That offer still stands?
Yeah, I think so. It was in their will, and they bought them all. Whoever, I don't know who's on the cemetery board, but they're supposed to know that it can be used for anybody that's a big flag or what they know. So that's kind of the beginnings. Of course, in the book, there's all different pictures, what the town looked like throughout the time periods. The oldest house, one of the oldest houses in town, was built around 1790. And that house still stands. If you're at the car wash and you're going toward the square, it's that next house right past the car wash, okay? It was built around 1790, built in 3 parts. One section was built by Jacob Arndt over the spring that I had said about before. He operated a tavern in it until his death, and then his widow lived there until her death. Then his son took it over, so that's one of the earliest.
I said it was the one across the street, but it's that
The
one.
hall that, it's
Between the car wash and the church.
Yeah, like beside the church. Yeah. In the late 1800s, there was a tin shop, a cobbler shop, a hotel, a tavern, a barber shop, a roller mill. So that was some of the businesses that went on in the town. Of course, you know, every town had a hotel or a tavern. The cobbler shop was a cobbler shop. So those are some of the things that they.
Mountain House, can I ask about that, or are you
Yeah,
gonna?
let me look into it. Well, yeah, we can come up to that. She said about the Mountain House.
Sorry, the paper.
Do you know where the Mountain House is now?
No.
Well, first of all, the original Lauer store, so my great-grandparents' store and carpenter shop, was where Kirkendall's store was. When I was a kid, it was Kirkendall's and Cutshaw's. And for you that don't know where Kirkendall's and Cutshaw's were, we're at the square. This leads to the school, and right on that corner is a big building that's now all apartments. That was Kirkendall's store and Cutshaw's store when I grew up. But that was Jacob Lauer and Lewis's cabinet, carpentry shop, equipment shop.
That was Bushman's store.
And Bushman's, yeah. Bushman's when I was little, and then Kirkendall's when I was older.
Mhm.
Right, Bushman's.
Because Cutshaw's was after the outlet.
Right. The two grocery stores side by side, which, well, one was a grocery store and one had, Bushman's had all kinds of stuff, everything that you needed, right? From underwear to canned tuna.
Yeah.
So the Mountain House, was owned by a lot of different people. The Mountain House, we're now at the bank, the big white building right beside the bank going out of town, was called the Mountain House, and it was a hotel. And it was owned, by my great-grandfather, Aaron Slusser, in 1891 to about 1918. At the same time, he owned the Hotel Bigler in Biglerville, which is the big building on the corner. He owned both of those. I did find, as I was looking up stuff with him, a public sale thing that says the Hotel Biglerville will be offered at public sale, a three-story building occupying 1 block on York Street from Gettysburg Street to Penn Street, equipped with a steam heat plant, acetylene light, borough water, and all modern improvements, successfully conducted for many years as a hotel. The property is improved with a large barn with a stable room for 35 horses, which is now the hardware store. Ice house, cattle yard, hog pen, chicken house, and other necessary outbuildings. A vacant lot on Penn Street fronting on York Street was sold as part of this property. The sale commences promptly at 2 o'clock. So that was on in 1918. So had both of them sold one off and then kept the Mountain House in Arendtsville. I don't know a lot about Aaron. I was telling them earlier he was the black sheep of the family, and we weren't allowed to talk about him as kids. So my brother and I are slowly finding out some crazy stories about Aaron and why he might not have been allowed to be talked about. He married my great-grandmother as a second marriage, because his first wife died. Okay, he was 42, she was 24. He's quite the businessman. He owned 5,000 acres where Bear Mountain is now, and he lost them all in a card game.
Oh.
And he died homeless in Harrisburg. And my great aunt went and picked him up, picked his body up, brought him back, and they buried him way far away from the rest of his family in the cemetery with his first wife. So that's the, I mean, like, he wasn't a murderer or something like that, but you weren't allowed to talk about him. So Steve and I really didn't know a whole lot about his life. And then I found out that he grew up in Wanksville. His father owned the steam engine sawmill in Wanksville at Amos Busser. And they actually owned pretty much the farm in Wanksville, close to where my one daughter right now lives. So that was kind of cool to know that. So he came, the Slussers were in Wanksville and the Lowers were in Arendtsville, and the Slusser came to Arendtsville for the Lower lady, and that's how the Slussers got to Arendtsville. But then in, Suzanne, when? 1980s, early 1980s,
Yeah.
Suzanne's parents and my parents bought the Mountain House after Bill Raff had died, because he had run it for years and years and years and years as the post office. He was the postmaster. Had a little restaurant in there in the Mountain House. I don't know if he called the Mountain House then, still probably. Raffin's Burgers. I remember going there as a kid and the old men sitting and playing checkers, and they would leave their checker game going the next day and the next day and the next day and just come back. And it was a big deal for us to get to go and have like a milkshake at Bill Raff's restaurant. But they bought the house and turned it into a card shop and an antique store with plans to do like an ice cream shop. And it was open 5-6 years.
Yeah, I know, I think Sandy, they closed it in 88, I want to say. So maybe they had it like 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. And it was beautiful inside.
Beautiful.
We worked so hard on us, all us kids and parents. We all helped clean it out and carry junk.
Yeah. The
Had
stairs were
beautiful
so
fireplace. Each room had a beautiful fireplace in it. People still lived upstairs. There were apartments that they left upstairs. But our moms loved it. The dads, I don't know. It was a thing they went ahead with the wives to do, I guess, or whatever. But and it went pretty well. But then when I think the major thing that killed it was in the fall was a busy time, and apple harvest weekends were always good because people would stop. And when they started rerouting apple harvest traffic away from Gettysburg, that really cut down on the amount of stuff that people that they had come through, and they had to make the awful decision to sell it. And then we all very sadly watched it go for low income housing. And I don't know what it looks like inside anymore.
Well, the Interfaith Housing Authority purchased it,
Yeah.
and, through Rural Opportunities. So, and I'm not sure, Sandy, how well, I don't know, it used to be very much targeted for lower income, but I'm not sure if that is the
I don't
case
know
anymore.
it is now anymore either.
Yeah, I know that whenever you wreck your car into a corner.
It stands.
doesn't-
It stays standing.
You have to, it does stay standing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it takes a couple months to get that fixed, but,
Yeah, the house did
Sandy's-
better than the car, I think.
Sandy's mother and my mother were best friends, and it was really, I think, a great dream for them to go in on it together, and we had tons of fun. I mean, that's another discussion.
Yes,
But yeah, they had great fun, I think, the years that they did have it open.
Yeah, so if you, I don't know who has the book, but on my page 90 is a picture of with all the men standing in the front and two ladies hanging out
Women
the
out
top
front.
windows. So you can see all the men here on Decoration Day. And it's not in the picture, but for, well, Lynn, 40 years probably. How many years have we had the lake? For a long time. I had the tin light from the post in front of the house, the big tin light like this, in my garage that was in very bad shape. And we would drag it out every once in a while, and I'd say, want to get this light fixed, because it's the mountain house light. And finally, last year,
Yeah.
Lynn worked on it, we had another friend do some work on it, and my son-in-law put the glass in it, and now I have a beautiful light in front of my house, that's the mountain house light. So I said to my kids, when you sell this house, take the light with you. So I don't know if they will or not, but yeah, so what question did you have of the mountain house?
Well, your mother took me to the mountain house and told me a little bit about it, so
Yeah.
it's, so what, there was a lady that lived in town that was a fun lady.
Alston.
Yeah. What was her place?
Well,
It's
where was it, you're asking?
No, I knew where it was. It was very narrow but tall. Wasn't that a Store's?
Yes, it was an oyster restaurant. We sold oysters. Al Stone's house was 2 doors down from the mountain house. Next to the garage, yeah. So it was the house before the garage. Right now, it's a brick house, has a very high porch. You can walk in a door from the street, and then the porch is up high. And the downstairs was a restaurant and an oyster bar. Because back in those days, this area was really big with oyster bars, and they would bring them in from Baltimore, packed in ice, and they would sell the oysters in the restaurants and stuff. And, her family owned the oyster restaurant. Alice was an interesting character. Do you guys know her? Do you remember, some of you at all?
Yes.
Yes. She
was still alive when I first came.
she refused to put a bathroom in her house till I was a teenager maybe, when they finally put a bathroom in and she refused to use it. We were scared of her as kids. She was another little teeny tiny lady, very dirty, would wear her, put the nylons on, but only like to her knees, so they were all crunched down like, very often had different shoes on, an old baggy coat. She scared the hell out of us kids. And she collected things, and the house was full of antiques. And she would give things to people. Like one time she knew I collected antique bottles, so she gave me this beautiful antique bottle. And my dad made me give it back to her because he said, next week she will accuse you of stealing it. And I gave it back to her, and she gave it back to me, and I gave it back to her, and she gave it back to me, and I have it. But not all mentally there with it. But lived by herself until late 80s at least. At least she seemed 150 when I was a kid. But when she died and they went into the house, there were boxes to the ceiling, empty boxes and full boxes, and just little pathways through the whole, because she would not let anybody in the house.
She was an original porter.
Pathways through the house, and I don't remember, Cindy, do you know who cleaned it out, or how they cleaned it out or anything when she died? I don't know.
They had it cleaned out.
I know, but I don't remember what they did.
I think it took 2-3 tractor trailers.
Yeah, and what they did with the stuff, I don't know. All of the stuff from the restaurant was still all there, probably some of the oysters.
Stacks floor to ceiling of
Newspapers, and newspapers stacked floor to
Yeah.
ceiling. And she would go to the bathroom in
You had to
the
walk sideways
bucket.
down.
Yeah, There were cats in
Walk
there, I
straight.
remember that. Remember there were cats? She had
Oh, yeah, and cats,
Oh.
She had
yeah.
feral cats.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, the other day, my granddaughter came out and she had leotards on and they were all walked down around her leg. I said, "My God, you look just like Alice But yeah, she was the character
Yeah.
of,
You know, she really was not, she was strange, but she wasn't